Tim, let's get into our thumbnail story today. It's not as exciting as the altcoin headlines, but Donald Trump is expected to record an interview with Joe Rogan on Friday. This has been hotly anticipated, but now it is set. Trump's set to go on the Joe Rogan podcast. This has a lot of implications. I don't think anybody's really surprised, but now we have a final date. It is this Friday, just days away. What are your thoughts here? What is going to be said? What's not going to be said? What are the touchy areas? What are your thoughts?
Well, as a crypto channel, I would love to believe they're going to talk about crypto. But I don't think Joe Rogan, while he's dabbled in the Bitcoin conversation, I don't think that that's going to be something on the tip of his brain to bring up. Obviously, I think they're both pro Bitcoin people, but I don't think they're going to go down that trail. We also, if you've bet on any debates, any speeches from either presidential candidate, Trump or Kamala, that we're thinking, oh, is there a chance they bring up crypto? They never do, right? So while we get all the headlines and we know it's a big deal, they never seem to think it's important enough to really talk about at the big events, except for unless Donald Trump's speaking at the Bitcoin conference. But I think the biggest topic, absolutely, T-Shroom, is going to be free speech. Free speech and the protection of free speech is going to be the most important conversation that they have, what the future of it looks like, the dangers that the world is in right now of losing it. That is going to be 100% on the docket. Even though it's old news, my assumption, because it still comes up from time to time with other people, is that they're going to talk about the assassination attempts. I don't want to start a rumor here because somebody else started it, and I don't know if this is fact-checked yet or not, but we've seen celebrities already who in past election cycles were anti-Trump turn pro-Trump after the assassination attempts. Of course, we know Zuckerberg very publicly came out as now a believer in Donald Trump, telling him he's not going to help rig the election anymore. YouTube, don't silence us for fake news. I'm not saying they did. I'm not saying they didn't. That's just the details of the story we're talking about right here. That good old Zuck said, hey, I like Trump. I thought that was very brave. That was a pretty bad A thing to do. I'm not going to say any wordy dirties on the show, especially if there's any children here watching. But you know who I'm hearing a rumbling right now who's also going to come out and support and thought that everything that happened over the last couple of months was amazing is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. That could be pretty big. He obviously was a big supporter of Joe Biden back in 2020. He has publicly said he would not endorse Joe Biden. That was before Joe Biden stepped down, and now Kamala Harris is the Democratic presidential candidate. He has not come forward publicly saying he's going to support Harris for president either. Why? Because she's just an extension of Joe Biden in his eyes, I would imagine. And he's already said, I don't want another 4 years of what we just went through. So my assumption, that was all kind of wrapping up, T-shirt. I think that the assassination and Donald Trump, what he's had to go through, let's tie that in with, they're going to talk about the assassination. They're going to talk about the court cases and the felonies he's committed and what that looks like in a political landscape of war. And there was something else I thought they would discuss. You know what? With his relationship with Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, I bet you they talk about the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency as well. I would be very surprised if those three topics are not discussed in depth on this podcast. But what about you, T-Shirt? What are you expecting from an interview that I want to start with? Before I throw it to you, I also think that this thing could freaking break the internet. T-Shroom, I gave some high thoughts on it. What about you? What do you think is going to be discussed, and how big of a deal do you actually think this is?
I think they're going to talk about the media. They're going to talk about the mainstream media. Joe Rogan really is one of the biggest symbols of, kind of anti-mainstream media passively. Like that wasn't even his intent, but he has gained so much more ear share, more market share, and carved that out from names like CNN, Fox News, and that's the way that's gone. And I think that that's going to be something that they'll want to talk about a little bit. Ivermectin, the pandemic, Trump was the one who put Operation Warp Speed into motion. And, Joe Rogan has kind of faced a lot of criticism for his use of ivermectin. And, I think that they'll probably talk about that a little bit. Not being pro-war, being anti-war. I think Joe Rogan's a pretty big proponent of that. Cannabis legalization has been a huge thing that Joe Rogan cares about quite a bit. Russiagate, I don't know if they'll talk about that, but that would be a big one. And then I agree that the Department of of Governmental Efficiency,
Yeah.
I think that'll be a pretty big one too. And then there'll also be just all kinds of like little nuggets. Like Rogan likes to get in there, sometimes talk about animals, talk about people's families, and just there'll be all kinds of stuff that nobody was kind of expecting. And I listen to probably 1 out of every 4 Joe Rogan podcasts that tickle my fancy, that catch my interest. He's an excellent interviewer who leads with curiosity, not afraid to ask the hard questions, not afraid to have people that he disagrees with on. I think politically have a lot of admiration for him, because while I don't agree with everything that Joe Rogan stands for politically, he has on people like Bernie Sanders, he has on people like Tulsi Gabbard, he has on people that he doesn't necessarily agree with, to hear them out, to hear what they have to say. And now having somebody like Joe Rogan, the only person who would be better to have on would be Joe Biden and Kamala Harris right there to really get the full picture. But I don't know if that's something that will happen. But yeah, I'm excited for this interview. Will they talk about crypto? Maybe, if the Department of Governmental Efficiency comes up, if Elon comes up, there might be a segue into crypto. But the reality is that there's only so much time that's going to be in this podcast. My guess is it's not going to be like a 3-hour marathon like some of the guests come on and do. I think it's probably going to be an hour and a half. And with that time, crypto is just not. It's important. Obviously, we know it's important, but it's not a big enough voting issue for the average American. So, yeah,
I think a couple of things you pointed out there are very important notes for anyone listening. And I'm assuming most people are up to date with what's where Donald Trump is with Joe Rogan and Joe Rogan's views on a lot of different things. But in case you're not, or in case you were unaware of it, Joe Rogan has not been a fan of the conservative side of the political realm. He was not a fan in 2016 of Donald Trump. He was not necessarily a fan in 2020. I don't know who he voted for. I don't know if he actually made that clear. I don't know what he did. But even up to the last couple of months, there was a big deal. And I highly doubt this gets brought up. I think it just gets swept under the rug. But it would be very fascinating if Joe Rogan kind of put this out there and kind of publicly asked for some form of an apology from Donald Trump, because in the last couple of months, he made it very clear in a podcast, or didn't make it very clear. In a podcast, he said the only sensible presidential candidate is RFK. Didn't officially endorse him, didn't say I hate Donald Trump, but the way it was received absolutely was he was endorsing RFK. He believed that Donald Trump was not a good person for president. It went on, there was a massive backlash, and I say massive, there was a widespread mega movement that said, oh, Joe Rogan's a terrible guy, he shouldn't have said that, yada, yada. Donald Trump, I believe, even tweeted something to the effect of, I wonder how many boos he's going to get at the next UFC fight, right? Clearly, the water's been put under the bridge with RFK joining Donald Trump. Joe Rogan, I am assuming, even though he hasn't done it publicly, and I don't think he's going to do it publicly in this interview, is going to be voting for Donald Trump. I believe he thinks he's the better candidate. I don't think he's going to, D-Shroom, but I would love to see him ask that tough question on kind of getting a public apology slash like, hey, what were you thinking here? Like, what was the details here? Joe Rogan is not afraid of any human. Joe Rogan is not, this interview is not going to be too big for him. He is not going to be afraid to offend Donald Trump whatsoever. And I think that's going to make for a beautiful show if he does do it a little bit, make Trump a little uncomfortable. The other thing you said, again, people are going to say he's not, but I believe Joe Rogan is extremely unbiased. I guarantee you his team, if they haven't already, is going to also reach out to Kamala Harris to get her on. Because that's just great TV, and at the end of the day, he's an influencer. He's a show producer who lives off of the numbers, and that would get a lot of numbers as well. I just highly doubt Kamala Harris, especially after some of her recent interviews and recent outings, would want to walk into the Lion's Den, a Joe Rogan podcast. Probably not going to happen. That's the first thing I'm watching. When I come over into liquidation heat maps, I'm seeing, while we do have liquidations to the upside that I'm really excited about, and I'm very bullish over the next couple of weeks, I'm one of the ones telling you I think that we still, at this point, can see new all-time highs around election time, even with this pullback. I think by the end of the year, 100K is not off the table of happening in the calendar year 2024. But what am I looking at to the downside? I do see some hefty liquidations to the number of $639 million worth of liquidations could happen with the pullback down towards 66,000. In all actuality, we could drop lower, coming down here towards 64.4. I highlight that on this morning's video. But I think the main target to keep an eye on is a former resistance level where we have heavy liquidity at 66,000. That's what brings us over to the charts. I just mentioned 66. Of course, that was the heavy resistance back here at the end of September. If you are newer to charts, that's completely okay. This is a very bullish pattern we're in at the moment where we are setting higher highs and higher lows, but it's not uncommon whatsoever for the price action to come back and retouch a former resistance level, turn it into support, and then continue to the upside. That's what we are watching. But I want to make sure I'm very clear here with the charts that it could technically, from a chart perspective, go lower. Let's talk about it here, starting off with the chart reason why I think that a correction for Bitcoin is necessary. We're on the daily chart right now. Let's start off with the simpler ones. The MACD is moving down. It is going to looks like it wants to cross bearish for the first time since back here on October 1st. What happened when we crossed bearish back here? Yeah, we had a nice little 10% pullback. Is Bitcoin going to pull back 10% this time? Not 100% certain on that, but it does mean a little bit of a correction before a rally comes in. The RSI got overextended, telling us we were overbought. It's cooling off, but the biggest one of them all is the bearish divergence, the red reversal, the negative money flow, and it's changing this morning, or it's changing this afternoon as we're getting a little bit of a pump in price, but this morning we had negative money flow. If we can end the day on a rally, that's on the table. It absolutely is. If we can end the day on the rally, I'll change my perspective and say, all right, we're avoiding this major sell signal. But with everything else we're looking at, with these liquidation charts, with the fear and greed index, with these other indicators kind of telling us we're a little overextended, we're a little overbought, my assumption is there's a little bit of a sell signal coming here on Bitcoin. I think realistically 66 is good, but keep an eye. As I said, around 64, 63,000 range. We'll put a box right here. I do not think this box is going to get hit, but we are watching the smart trail quickly climb up here. It's probably going to climb up here in the next couple of days. Could we, with a daily sell signal, see the price of Bitcoin make its way into that smart trail, bounce somewhere here around 64,000, and then make its case to the upside? That, to me, is the realistic worst case scenario. Not going to happen, not guaranteed, but if we lose 66, which I think is the more realistic support level, then all of a sudden you have to start considering 64, 64.5, 64.4 is kind of the range I'm watching there. Another reason why I'm bearish here, I did not cover this in the morning video, is lower time frames starting to say, or have been saying, we're under a sell signal. If I looked at the 12-hour, we entered a sell signal here today where we had not only the bearish divergence, not only the red reversal and the bearish momentum, but this one did see the negative money flow. It did see a bearish cross on the MACD. It did see the RSI cooling off. And this would suggest we should at least pull back to this smart trail here of guess where? 65,950. That's $50 away from what price? Ladies and gentlemen, say it with me. $66,000, the level we talked about here just a couple of minutes ago. There is a lot of things on the charts for Bitcoin suggesting 66,000 should be a very good spot to acquire more Bitcoin before the next leg of the rally. And that will simply be another higher low in a bull trend that Bitcoin has been in ever since August of 2024. That is amazing news for anyone out there holding Bitcoin.